All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, August 20th. And a real nice day for trading, I might add, today. Pretty good stuff, and in the overall averages, we're just up a little bit. Q's actually finished down on the day. They were down 9 basis points, but the small caps, mid caps, they continue to move. The transports had a huge day for the airlines. I'm going to talk a little bit about the airlines. But huge day for the transports. They were up 1.3%. The Jets ETF was up almost 3% on the day. The Chinese internets came back today. That was your second best performing group, up 2%. But you had some pretty good participation and I would say some pretty good market breadth. You could see our market breadth indicator down here, all positive, all minty green, as like we like to refer to it. So some pretty good breadth. And again, if you look at some of these sectors, solar names, which we haven't seen them go green in a while, they were up 1.7%. Retail again continues to be just continues to power through. They were up almost 1.5%. And then you had energy, gold miners, like I said, a couple different groups in there that haven't been participating. Industrials, which I profiled a bit in the newsletter this weekend, did pretty well. So bunch of different groups to talk about. If you look at the whole group, or I should say not the whole group, all of stocks in the U.S. Up a little bit more and making a brand new all-time high. That's the VTI ETF. That's the total stock market ETF at all-time highs today. So, I like today. I love when we have a little bit of chop and I'm just like I'm in the right things. So let me go over a couple different names and some of the option activity for the day. There was definitely some interesting things. So. We'll start with I could start with a number of different places. Let's start with the airlines. It was interesting, and I am like I don't. I'm not ashamed to admit this. I am the worst airline trader ever. I just can't trade the airlines very well. I dumped out of AAL calls. I mentioned AA calls several times. There's a lot of positioning that's been going out in January. This started. Do I have this up on my Twitter page? I don't think I do. But if you look and you kind of search back with what I've been tweeting about, so I went into American Airlines trade about once that call buying was started. I think that was mid July. So you've had to basically stay in it for a while and and wait for one of these big green days. I got a big enough green candle and I decided to get out of it. It was a position that hadn't done anything for me, and I just consistently don't have enough patience to stay in the airlines trades, and I've gotten dinged on them a couple times. I think they're really tricky to play. It is what it is. This American airline, it is below the 200-day moving average, but the call buying seems to be correct. Like I said, big heavy call buying out in January a couple weeks ago. So looks like they're starting to move. Delta looks like a better looking chart. Delta really saw a nice trade today. 5,000 contracts. And this also went up and away. Haha. 5,000 of the October 60 calls sweep, opening trade, sizable, $676,000. That came right at lunchtime today. Today I had to leave for a couple hours, and of course I missed this trade. But really nice move, up 3% today. So outside of that, I've been playing the waiting game in about 4 or 5 different swing trades. And KSU's another one. KSU, we saw some December calls. This one was, it's fine. It kind of got saved last week by basically a thread. If you look at what I'm talking about on the weekly chart, you could see this big old hammer bar staying above the value area for the year. And now going to test all-time highs. This is a really nice looking chart. It just actually needs to go ahead and get going, but a lot of consolidation here, and we'll see if this thing could get going. And I've got a few other trades that I've been sitting in that are starting to work. I went into Alta the beginning of last week. That's starting to curl up. I left a small piece on. I took targets, or I took the position for the most part off because it expires on Friday. Grub is another name that I think technically looks pretty good. You know, you had the big move up on earnings, and it stalled out and it's been consolidating. Got a little bit of a bid when Yelp reported, but took out is the highest close that we've had since back on earnings. So I took a little bit more of that trade off today. Another trade is, I'm just going to talk about my trades for a minute and then I'll go into some other names. But MasterCard, I got into 2 weeks ago. It hasn't done anything. Doesn't mean there's been any reason to sell. You just have to be patient. And this trade expires for me at the end of the month. So if this thing gets going a little bit more, that would be super, super nice. But really, that's the case. You know, if you're in some of these trades and you've committed capital, you can't be rushed out of them just because they're not doing anything. You kind of just have to stay the course. And I'm in a lot of those trades. Like I'm in EA, where I actually added a little bit this morning on the dip. You know, Take Two is another name that's been seeing a lot of calls. Hammer Bar. Like I said, the Qs were not where the action was today. And even if you look at the Qs performance, which was red on the day, if you look at the names that were performing, it's a little bit different. You know, AAL was the best performer. Netflix, which I'll talk about next. Win, which we've seen some repeat call buying in. That name also did well. Micron actually got going a little bit today. I mentioned Ulta. Adobe actually had a nice day. I was talking about Adobe looking like it might be looking like it's going to break down. So the fact that it recovers is really good. I was actually eyeing a short there. Did not pull the trigger on it. And then on the flip side, you could see a bunch of names down. You still had the semi names underperform. Nvidia did come back. We had some traders make some money in that in the room today, off of the lows. You know, did come back and finished up 1.2%. So nice little day trade that some members did. Also Netflix sticking with the ends. Netflix was a real nice winner today, up 3.5%. You know, and there was a lot of names, growth names in different groups, different sectors that had these nice outside moves today. But Netflix, after some weakness last week, bounced back pretty nicely. I went into a Google trade right on the open. I sold some put spreads. Not a big day out of Google. That's okay. You know, it's a trade where I sold premium. So basically, all I needed to do is stay here. If it rallies, that would be even better because I could take that trade off sooner. But it's fine. You know, not bad at all. Amazon actually finished down on the day. So kind of lackluster, but that's fine. Let some other names participate a little bit. And the more like Amazon and, you know, some of the market leaders that have been for the last, you know, ever so long, you know, the longer that other names get a little bit of attention, the more attractive Amazon comes, if it continues to come in a little bit. FDX was another nice winner for me. This is the name we talked about last week. Didn't close on the highs, but it's moving in the right direction. So I'm targeting this 257 VPOC as well. We'll talk a little bit about the shoes and the athletic leisure companies. Nike had 2 upgrades today, so up 3%. A few other names that I've been talking about is Lululemon. Huge day for Lululemon, up 5%. So like I said, a lot of names had these outside moves. So really, really nice move by Lululemon today out of that consolidation. And again, I keep thinking of a couple of different like gifts. The one is, you know, well, we're waiting from Caddyshack, and you know that's basically what you've had to do. You've had to just sit and be patient because some of these names are just really strong. You just have to wait until they have that day where they're going to explode higher. Very difficult to predict when that's going to happen, but you kind of just get the sense that if you're staying in these trades long enough, that they're going to have a big, you know, this big green candle sooner or later. And you got it today for yoga pants, Lululemon. So we might as well talk a little bit about the defense names as well. I'll talk a little bit about option activity, but I like this chart. I've talked about this group a couple times. It hasn't done it yet. Today you finally got that new high, and I think this looks pretty good going forward. ITA very, very strong. I'll just kind of bounce around from a couple different names. Look at this move in Blackstone today. Keep an eye on this. If you're not in this name, We've seen a lot of call buying both in Blackstone and KKR. KKR did not close on the high, so it didn't officially make that turn. But I would keep a close eye on this company. There's been a lot of paper in there, a lot of call buying going out to January that it has had a decent pullback. And watch for this thing to turn the corner. Another one where it's been, I will talk very objectively about option activity. There's some trades that work very, very well on option activity. It depends who the fund that's doing it. There's a fund that continually will buy FTC in really some great places. I think they've bought it here on dips, and in here. So I've been long. I got long FTC. I think in here you could have got it a little bit cheaper than I did, but up really nicely and still retracing a bigger move. If you take a step back and you can see this FTC may have some more to go after this big drop on, I think this was an earnings gap. No, maybe it wasn't earnings, but so retracing a lot of the moves and, a really nice play there. What was the other name I was going to mention that recently had option activity that's working? Teva also had a real nice day today. Look at this move after call buying, and it was also revealed that, and I talked about this name in the weekend video, but repeat call buying, and that Mr. Buffett and Mr. Miller, Bill Miller, are also in this. So you got a huge day. So like I said, we just went over about 5 or 6 stocks that all up 4 or 5%. So just really, really nice if you're in any of these. And again, you don't even have to be in that big of a position for some of these names. There was one other group that I was going to talk about. It is escaping. Boeing. So Boeing saw some call activity. Kind of gives you a little bit of a confirmation. Some of the call activity, again, very objective. My job is to try to get into these names before they have the big pop. Half of what we see, right, it's a split. Sometimes we see some really good signals like FDC, where it's a pretty smart buyer that comes in. And then we see other things where it's just momentum buying, where a name is up big and people are buying it. Like we saw that at the end of the day today in AAL, right? Now, I mean, is that really a good call buyer when somebody buys it? Somebody's looking obviously for continuation. But to me, it's, what we saw a couple weeks ago, it was call buying into basically nothing. And again, you had to be patient, for a swing trade. You had to stay in it for longer than I did, which was over a couple weeks. And, you had to be patient with that. But the call buying, like right at the high of the day, that's the momentum stuff. That's the stuff where you already want to be in it. So I'll go through a couple names. In the beginning of the day, like I mentioned, we've been seeing some win repeat call activity. This name really got my attention. This is something different. This is a name that's been, I don't know, I have to double check to see if it is still on the IBD 50 list, but this is a solar name. And, the solar stocks were up today. So this I like, right? I mean, this did not happen at the high of the day. It happened into here. It's got to reclaim the 50-day moving average. Not that big of a trade, but for something like this, it doesn't really see that much option activity. And this drew, about 500 contracts, about $100,000 of premium that we saw for September. So I think it looks interesting. It's had some big moves, big move up on earnings and big move down on earnings, coming back into the 50-day moving average. Kind of a crazy looking chart, but once it retakes that 200-day moving average, I think is a good entry port, or even here if you wanted to take, start a small position. Yandex continues to see calls, over the last 5 days, probably 3 or 4 out of the last 5 days, it's been seeing aggressive call buying in that YNDX. I mentioned Teva already. There was a nice URI call spread. We'll look at this chart again, but really nice to see the industrials wake up a bit. But you could see URI, which has kind of been a difficult trade since they had good earnings and they just haven't done anything. I think this was earnings. Let's see. Well, let's wait for Thinkorswim to come up here, which it doesn't want to do it. All right. Well, but anyway, it's been pretty choppy here the last couple weeks. Somebody thinking that, yeah, here it is. So really didn't do much on earnings, even though they reported some good ones. A few other names that I thought were interesting for the day. A little bit of Abbott. I like this chart. I've talked about this chart. Again, it's tough because you can't own everything. Johnson and Johnson holds also saw repeat call activity. I mentioned how Johnson and Johnson, I think there's still more upside for it. This Abbott was actually down on the day, but you could see it looks kind of attractive. It's been a slow mover, but I think Abbott goes higher. I'm not going to look at Johnson & Johnson because we reviewed that one enough. Big rig call buyer, September 28th, so end of the month. Almost 10,000 contracts there. So again, you kind of had your choice in some different things. I like this DHR trade. Again, I'm at the point where even though I'm seeing some good trades on the tape, I'm kind of looking to take off a little bit of risk because it is what it is. It's mid-August at this point. And I want to be a little bit conservative here, but this is one that you kind of put on your watch list. And again, I was going to talk about this in the weekend video, but I kind of ran out of time because I did a 40-minute video for this weekend. But you don't have to get into every name. If you want to wait a little bit in this DHR, which I am. Let me just extend this to the right. Maybe put a limit or an alert to maybe wait for this thing to start to get going a little bit. But I like the signal here in DHR. Here's the trade just so you could see the details of it. 600 contracts, and you can see it's got some meat behind it. It's about a $300,000 trade and a little bit of time too. So they're not looking for like the little momentum. They're looking for a decent sized move. So they bought the at the money December 100 calls for 465. Again, $280,000 option trade in DHR. So I like that one. So again, what I do half the day because you can't be in 100 positions. So I would put an alert. I think right around 101.30 for that one. A few other names that we saw. Yeah, so we did see some Boeing June calls today. Yeah, I think the Boeing chart looks pretty good. I mentioned this one in the yesterday in the weekend video as it needing to reclaim the 50-day moving average. Well, you got it. And I think a bunch of other industrial names have been looking pretty good. I detailed EMR yesterday, which had some continuation. I think Honeywell, which I don't think Honeywell did much today, but I think Honeywell still looks good. So again, a lot of things going on in the single name space, different groups. Besides Netflix and a couple other tech names performing pretty well, that wasn't really where the momentum was. I think for the most part for the day, I think it's still in some other areas of the market, which is good. I think that's really good market breadth that we have some different places really outperforming and some interesting option activity today too. So I'll leave it here and have a great night, everybody, and see you tomorrow.